It's time to talk sports. It's Hacksaw's Headlines, a panorama of the world of sports, stories, comments, and opinions. Now, here's iconic sports talk show host Lee Hacksaw Hamilton and co-host John Riley.
Who wants to talk sports on a Monday? We do. You do. From the Dixie Line Lumber and Home Center studios in San Diego, we welcome you to our Monday bonus podcast, Hacksaw's Headlines. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lee Hamilton, along with my co-host John Riley. We welcome you coming off this great sports weekend. This podcast is brought to you by Dixie Line Lumber and Home Centers, 9 locations to serve you in San Diego. If you've got projects at home, work, back patio, or in the garage, think Dixie Line Lumber. Go to dixieline.com to find out all the things they can offer you. Fix it, build it. You will enjoy it in 2025 at Dixie Line Lumber. John Riley, good afternoon. Glad to see you caught your breath. Glad to see you did not pass out. I send John a list of hot topics on the table that we might talk about. I thought he was going to fall over because there's probably 103 things that we talk about on this Monday bonus podcast. How you doing?
Doing great. Yeah, we got a lot of topics on the table. Plus, you're always zinging me text messages. You're like my high-speed sports ticker on my phone.
Awful lot to cover. We're going to go a lot of different directions. Just a couple of business notes for those of you new to this podcast. When we're done with the hot topics on the table, we open it up to you to join us. You get to co-host with us, ask a question, make a statement, stand up, sound off, shoot us something in the Fans Forum chat box. John, for the new people, how does the Fans Forum work?
For the new people, this is how you get involved. If you have a question or comment in the world of sports for Hacksaw, drop your take in the live chat, Facebook, X, or YouTube. We'll get you involved in Fans Forum right after Hacksaw's Headlines.
And just a reminder, if you like sports, I have a website. It is all written. It's there first thing every morning, leehacksawhamilton.com. It's a compilation of all the big stories in the world of sports. You might be an NFL fan. You don't care about the other things? Fine. Just go to the football page. You might be into baseball, the NBA, all things NHL trade deadline. You name it, I write about it. leehacksawhamilton.com. It's there every morning of the week. Want you to share, tell everybody what we do Mondays and Thursdays at 1:30 p.m. Want you to subscribe. When you subscribe on the YouTube channel, you will get the alerts every time we put something new up on the YouTube channel, which is quite often during the course of the week. Also want you to become part of Hacksaw's Insiders Group. Go to my website. Right on the front page, there's an orange box. Just fill it out. You'll get on the email list for all the special things that we have. And, of course, if you're on social media, I want you to join my Twitter all-star team. Go to X. Just type in the handle at Hacksaw1090. Hit the follow button because I put a lot of stuff up on social media on X too. John, we're going a lot of different directions. Unless you have plans to stay here till Wednesday talking about these 103 things, let's hit the starting line. Green flag, go.
Green flag, go. Okay, we got to go to let's go to Peoria. Let's talk a little bit of Padres.
Let's talk San Diego Padre baseball. They're getting answers to questions, but there are still questions out there. We're halfway through exhibition baseball. They got 3 weeks before the start of the season. Let me walk you through names on the roster, and I sense where things are, and then you can respond in Fans Forum if you want. Yu Darvish is yet to pitch in a Cactus League game. He's being brought along very slowly. He did pitch in a B-League minor league game against White Sox farmhands, and he got blasted, which was really a bit of a surprise. The bigger concern really faced Robert Suarez. He got whacked again. That's 2 bad outings in the 3 appearances for Robert Suarez this spring. Throwing strikes, walking guys. He's struggling a little bit there. I don't know what to make of Randy Vasquez. Same old, same old. He got smoked again in his last start in the Cactus League. He has these good innings, and then he has a bad innings that he can't survive. Is he really a trustworthy guy? Jason Hayward has no base hits in spring training, which has to be a concern. Connor Joe is hitting a .187. The 3 catchers, nobody's hitting better than 126 of the 3 catchers that are in the major league camp. Gavin Sheets is batting a .133. Leonardo DeVries is hitting 163, and Ethan Salas is hitting 143. Those young guys will be going to the minor league camp pretty quickly. positives so far in spring training. Matt Waldron, Stephen Kolek, combined 4 appearances, have yet to issue an earned run so far in the spring. These guys look like they're fighting for the number 5 and maybe even the number 6 spot in the rotation. Left fielder, I don't know how you can keep him out of the lineup if he keeps this up. Tirso Ornelas hitting .467 in the spring. Now, he's playing lots of different positions, but I'm very impressed there. Eggy Rosario hitting .425, part-time third baseman, part-time center fielder, part-time in left field. I think those 2 guys make this roster. Forrest Wall, who came from Houston, he's hitting .385 right now in very minimal appearances. And Oscar Gonzalez, who had done well with the Cleveland Guardians and before that with the Yankees in cameo appearances, he's hitting .368. There's an injury that's probably going to lead Brian Hoeing to the disabled list to start the season. He's yet to pitch. He's yet to throw a bullpen because of shoulder inflammation very early in camp. I assume he's going to be on the DL. But that being said, Alec Jacob has pitched well coming out of the bullpen. And Ron Marinaccio, who was with the White Sox and Yankees for brief appearances, he's pitched okay in his first 2 outings. So, John, there's some good, there's some bad, there's some we don't know yet. And then we got the guys that haven't really shown themselves. What do you think about this kind of mid-season Cactus League report I just gave you about the Padres?
Well, that's usually like this in spring training, right? I mean, thank goodness there aren't any serious injuries yet. But I love the whole Stephen Kolek story. I think, wouldn't it be terrific if he earned that number 5 spot, or at least was part of that mix,
with Waldron.
With Waldron, and, they're going to have to go 7 or 8 guys in their rotation over the course of the season. The Tirso Ornelas angle is interesting because he's been in the Padres program for isn't the longest tenure guy.
Yeah.
So let's just assume that he wins that left field spot. Now, the guys that they signed,
Jason Hayward.
Yeah, Hayward and Connor Joe, are they on a guaranteed major league contract, or could they be waived with no financial penalty?
There's no penalty. If they're on the opening day roster, contract's guaranteed, but it's a minimum contract for $1 million or $1.5 million. So there's not an enormous amount of money that's tied up in those guys. You were hoping one of them would surface. And again, we still have 3 weeks left, but I'm surprised that Hayward doesn't have a base hit. And obviously Connor Joe got some hits. But it's 25-man, 26-man roster. These are bench players we're talking about at multi-positions. But you would hope they do more than go 0 for the spring in terms of hitting at home plate. Now, when we get closer to opening day and the pitchers start throwing curveballs and sliders and cutters, will Ornelas do that? Will he continue to hit the way he's hitting? Will Eggy Rosario continue to hit? Once the guys start to dial it in as to what Major League opening day pitching is going to be like. So we got 3 weeks left to see if the veterans come out of this drought they're in, and if the kids can continue to hit at the level they're hitting at right now. Ornelas had not done much, but he hit 23 home runs last year at AAA El Paso, and he hit for a pretty decent average, and he's hit in virtually every exhibition game he's played in. So I'm kind of pleased. I don't know what position he is. I don't know which is Rosario's best position, but that's 2 positives that we've seen so far.
Yeah, I mean, that would be one of the surprises they're hoping to have in this camp. But yeah, you look around, I think Rosario's out of options, right?
Yes.
So they got to keep him or he's gone. But there's other guys like the ones that flirted with the roster, like Brandon Lockridge. I mean, those are El Paso guys, right?
Yeah. And you put them on waivers, nobody's going to claim them anyhow. Nobody's take a guy off waivers and have to stick him on your major league roster.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we are, all things Padres. Let's go from that to the next team we always cover and we get great response from.
Yeah, the Dodgers, pitching and hitting.
Dodgers.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, this is the report as of this hour. Tyler Glasnow has really got this thing dialed in with these rebuilt mechanics. We had talked weeks ago, just before the Cactus League camps opened, that he had changed his mechanics and his stride with his lead foot, his landing foot, to take the stress off his arm. Well, he's thrown his last 2 outings, 4 really bulletproof innings so far. But he was interesting yesterday. He made a comment in the Dodger dugout that I have to get my mechanics healthy. I am tired of people referring to me as the best pitcher with the best stuff who's on the disabled list. So he is more focused on his mental aspect in terms of stride, delivery, mechanics than his athleticism, that I'm going to throw the hell out of the ball to get it to home plate. So far, so good. Ohtani, 4 bullpens in. clocked at 97 in his last bullpen. And he's going through a bit of an adjustment because, John, he always pitched out of the stretch. They wanted to see what his mechanics would be like and would his velocity improve with a full windup. That's a powerful guy out on the mound. He's using the full windup through all these bullpen sessions. He clocked at 97 miles an hour. Dustin May had the dazzling first outing, second outing, dominant in the first inning, a walk, an error, another walk, and then a grand slam home run in the second inning of this last outing. He's not having any physical problems. His velocity still has oomph on it, but he had a bad outing. And again, the door was opened by a bad defensive play by the Dodger infield. Sasaki, he will make his first Cactus League exhibition appearance Tuesday. He'll face the Cincinnati Reds, so we'll see what the Japanese rookie is like. And a little bit of private concern about Freddie Freeman, the hero of the World Series. You know, he had 2 surgeries, one of them on the ankle. He's still having some pain with the ankle. The Dodgers have discussed with Freeman being a part-time first baseman, and when he's not at first base, being the designated hitter. So they're talking about maybe taking a little bit of the wear and tear off him rather than let him play 155 games at first base, which is a real pounding, at least maybe start the season that way. That's where we are, all things Dodgers. Right now, most of the news out of the Dodger camp is good news so far.
Rainbows and unicorns at Camelback Ranch.
Dodgers.
Everything's going on. Even the Freddie Freeman thing, that's not necessarily bad news. I mean, he's getting a little older. You want to mix him in. I mean, Freddie's going to want to play 155 games,
exactly.
But bring it down to 135 or something. Chris Taylor can play anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. They've got Max Muncy. They've got all kinds of guys that could be there on the days. And if you come up with a formula that gives him rest, you play him 2 and you let him DH the third day, you handle it so he doesn't have any setbacks along the way.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
That's all things Dodgers baseball. Let's talk about the third team here in Southern California because they are really in the headlines.
The Angels, the union rips the owner.
Tony Clark went public in Tempe, and he just laid it all out for everybody to know. The union has ripped Artie Moreno's ownership of the Angels. He says Artie Moreno has treated the luxury tax as his own personal salary cap. He says he's failing to put the best product on the field in the most unique market. He's referencing all of Southern California, that the Angels are really more than just Orange County's team because they want to be known as the Angels of Los Angeles. It's the LA market at the same time. He said, do you understand that Artie Moreno, since he took over ownership of this team, has paid the luxury tax one time in 20 years? He says they're in the number 2 market in the country, and they're not putting a quality product on the field, even though they're in the number 2 market in the nation. He says, do you understand that this ownership group has not won a postseason game since 2009? And he says, as of this morning, their payroll's at $202 million. The luxury tax doesn't kick into $241 million. You've got all this money and you haven't spent it all. Artie Moreno really took a broadside from Tony Clark, head of the Players Association. What he said was true. Virtually everything that came out of Tony Clark's mouth was true. Most of the, I think, fans in Orange County believe the same thing. Your reaction?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. He's not wrong. But, imagine if you're in New York and, you got the high spending Yankees and the Mets only spent $200 million. I mean, granted, that's a ton of money, but you would expect in those top markets that they've got all these additional revenue streams. I mean, why aren't the Angels getting some kind of a TV package on par or close to on par with the Dodgers?
Because they're Angels and they haven't done anything. They've won 1 World Series under Disney. But the Angels have given their fans a decade worth of really lousy baseball. The owner is gun shy because the owner has spent a ton of money. Tony Clark neglected to say, well, he did spend money and got burned badly by Josh Hamilton. He did spend money, and some of these other acquisitions didn't pan out, a.k.a. Anthony Rendon or Justin Upton, these other guys. So, I mean, Tony Clark forgot some of the other things that Artie Moreno has attempted to do, but Moreno really has been burned in free agency. But that being said, You're in the number 2 market in the country, or you're telling everybody you're in the number 2 market in the country. You're in Orange County, which could be a great, vibrant market just unto itself. You got to do more. And the fact that the payroll's only 202 and the tax doesn't kick in until 241, that means there's still more money there. But Arte Moreno's losing money. That's a byproduct of how bad the product's been. And by the way, he owns the product, so I put it at his front door. That was really interesting, though, for Tony Clark to say that. Now, I want Tony Clark to make a trip to Miami. I want him to say the same damn thing about Bruce Sherman, the nickel and dime owner of the Miami Marlins. You can go to Tampa Bay and do the same thing with Sternberg. And while you're at it, since you're on the East Coast, go to Pittsburgh and go after their ownership with the Pirates. There is no bloody reason anybody in baseball should be allowed to operate with payrolls of 57 million, 63 million, 78 million. That's what a whole bunch of these teams that I just named are operating under. Not the Angels, but operating with less than 100 million. There's 6 franchises under 100 million payroll. And the disparity between Miami, which at last report was 57 million, and the Dodgers at 383. How is that good for baseball, John, to have that type of disparity? So Clark, he fired scuds into the Angels ownership suite. He needs to do the same thing in Miami and Tampa, Pittsburgh, Sacramento Athletics, whatever the hell they're called. That's what he's got to do it for everybody. Put the pressure on everybody.
Whatever the hell they're called. Yeah. He's right. I mean, he's absolutely right. And I'm thinking, okay, New York, huge market, 2 teams. LA, huge market, 2 teams, obvious disparity. Angels aren't spending. What's going on in Chicago? Are the Cubs and the White Sox, are they exceeding the salary cap or the luxury tax?
The Cubs are close to luxury tax, and the White Sox are one of the bottom feeders. White Sox, last I counted, I think the White Sox had signed 28 off-season free agents. That's a wide variety of fringe players, minor leaguers. I mean, no marquee names.
Mm-hmm.
White Sox have only 1 quality player left, and that's Luis Robert, the outfielder. And they've tried to trade him, and he's been hurt so much, they've not let him go. But that's a crisis unto itself. That's mismanagement by Jerry Reinsdorf and all of his wide variety of presidents and general managers that he's kind of run through the old Comiskey Park. So they got problems. Baseball's bottom-tiered franchises have problems, and the union just can't stand there and represent Juan Soto. The union's got to represent the 25-man roster of the Miami Marlins or the Pittsburgh Pirates or as you say, that's a great point you make, the Chicago White Sox, or as I call them, the Chicago Blight Sox. There's a real disparity problem. Okay, that's baseball.
Well, hold on, one more thing about the Angels, because you were saying, oh, this could be a market into itself, Orange County, all that.
Bounce back season, too.
There's a chance there. Now, do you think the team has greater appeal to a fan base if it's the Anaheim Angels, the Los Angeles Angels, or the California Angels?
If it were me, I'd go back to what they used to be. California Angels sounds fine to me.
Yeah, I agree.
But the greater appeal is put a better bloody product on the field that doesn't lose 99 games, where you got all these guys making all this mega money that don't seem to care, and your farm system has not been able to produce very much. They got to solve the baseball problem, not the imagery marketing problem. If you wish to call it the California Angels, as it was during the Autry era, that'd be fine with me. But the problem is not the nickname or the logo or the color of the uniforms. The problem is the makeup of the roster.
Yeah, I hear you. You're right. They got to make some changes.
Damn right. I'm the host of the podcast. Thank you.
Yes, you are.
You're a Dodger, Padre, Angel fan. We've given you some fodder. Now we want you to respond into the Fans Forum chat box. Jump in line. Have an opinion. Have a take that doesn't suck. Ask a question. Be glad to give you an answer. And John will be glad to argue with it because it's his day to argue with the people he doesn't agree with. The Fans Forum chat box is open. We're not done with baseball because this one's going to explode. Go ahead, John. Next one.
Yeah, I saw this one, and this is going to be great to discuss.
Pete Rose, Hall of Fame. Pete Rose, ineligible list. Pete Rose, RIP, wherever the hell you are this morning. Pete Rose's family wrote a letter to Rob Manfred, the commissioner, said now that he is deceased, he should no longer be on baseball's ineligible list. You have his memorabilia. We think he should be allowed to be placed back on the Hall of Fame ballot. That letter from the estate of Pete Rose was then followed last week by a meeting between Rob Manfred and 2 members of the Rose family. He's, quote, taken it under advisement, has not issued a decision yet. Now, that's one angle to the Pete Rose story. The other angle is your president, Trump, goes public when he's not berating Zelensky, when he's not mandating Canada is going to be the 51st state, or not mandating sail your boats in the Gulf of America. He announced he's going to pardon Pete Rose. Okay, the question I pose is, what the hell are you pardoning him for? I mean, Pete Rose did serve prison time. A lot of people have forgotten this for income tax evasion.
Yeah.
All the income tax money he got on gambling, never filed for. So he went to the hole for about 5 months. So Trump has the ability to pardon him, I guess, posthumously for the IRS issue. Last I checked, unless Trump shows up at Cooperstown at the front door, he has no control over the Baseball Hall of Fame. MANFRED, I'm not even paying any attention to that. So what the big issue is, you got all his memorabilia. We all know his statistics. We understand the greatness of the person and the failure of the person too. If he opens the door for Pete Rose, does that not open the next door for, well, if him, why not shoeless Joe Jackson back in 1919 in the Black Sox scandal? He hit .356 in the World Series. Yeah, he was approached about taking money. He didn't throw any games, but he's suspended for life and died in poverty in South Carolina. And if it's Rose and now, open door for Joe Jackson, now what are we doing with your guy, the cheat in San Francisco, Barry Bonds? What do they do with Roger Clemens, a.k.a. steroids and all that, Balco, etc.? John, the floor is yours. Go ahead. You want to walk around, throw some gasoline on this topic, set a fire?
Well, here's one angle that bugs me is, why would you be so hardcore about preventing Pete Rose to be in the Hall of Fame, but now that he's dead, you're now willing to consider it? I mean, either he violated a rule that's an unbreakable rule and you don't ever let him in ever, or let the darn guy enjoy the moment while he's still alive if you're going to induct him. I mean, that doesn't make sense to me.
Ineligible because he bet on baseball. And there is evidence that he also bet on baseball as a player, but we never got beyond the Dowd report, which was just the damning evidence about what he did, and he admitted he did, and he signed the document for what he did as a manager. So he's ineligible as a person. Now that he's died, do you reconsider and allow his name to go on the ballot so he can go into the Hall of Fame, even if you want to put an asterisk on the plaque? Because everybody knows why Pete Rose was banned for decades upon decades since 1989. I think that's the only simple explanation. He was barred from baseball, just like shoeless Joe Jackson and the other guys of the White Sox in 1919, barred forever from baseball while they were alive. But if you let Pete Rose in, do you have to let shoeless Joe in?
Well, you should let them all in. And we keep having this argument all the time. And as much as I love Cooperstown and the Hall of Fame, I mean, that's like walking into a church. Yeah. But do we make too big of a deal out of this if Pete Rose is in the Hall of Fame or not in the Hall of Fame when his memorabilia and his image is already in the Hall of Fame? The only thing he's not having is just what do they call that? A bust or a plaque. That's all we're talking about. It's a plaque when he's really already in there.
But he broke baseball's bylaws as it relates to gambling.
Yeah. And he broke Ty Cobb's all-time hits record. So you put him in, you put the asterisk, you tell the whole story of baseball, you condemn him for his sins, but you acknowledge the reality of what he did on the field.
And you and I have argued about this before. I don't think you can write the history of baseball without Pete Rose being part of the history of baseball.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Fans Forum chat box is open. You know, if you got any asbestos shoes when you stand around the fire that John just lit, feel free to join us and comment on the decision that Rob Manfred has to make. We're going from baseball. Let's talk basketball.
Yeah, we're going from baseball to 7,220 feet, Aztecs-Wyoming.
San Diego State. Ugly win, but it's still a win. So the Aztecs are 20-7. I told John in the midst of that thing, had they played anybody else, they would have gotten their ass kicked. They would have been blown out of the back of the arena in Laramie. But they're playing Wyoming. They don't have a hell of a lot of athletes. They've played about 10 minutes of quality basketball, and somehow they beat a lowly Wyoming team. They won. They beat fatigue. They beat the altitude. They beat substandard rebounding. They beat bad referee work during the course of the game. And they finally beat the Cowboys. Aztecs, they got out rebounded 39-23. Aztecs missed 13 free throws. Aztecs had 17 turnovers in the game, 17 fouls in the game, and yet they still won. That being said, back on the plane, got to go into Las Vegas and play UNLV tomorrow night, short work week at altitude, after having all kinds of travel problems trying to get out of Laramie to come home. They've had virtually no practice time whatsoever. But they finish up conference play this week. Vegas Tuesday, Nevada, Reno on Saturday, and then they'll go to the tournament. We don't know yet, Magoon Gwath, whether or not he's going to be ready to play in the Mountain West Conference tournament, but it's really, really ugly. A couple of other brief notes. UCSD, they are sitting there at 26-4.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. They beat Cal State Fullerton 100-55.
Is that good?
At one time, at halftime, it was 47-19 UCSD. They hit 18 threes. There are NBA teams that don't hit 18 threes in a game.
Mm-hmm.
So UCSD is rolling, getting ready for the Big West Conference tournament. USD snapped a 16-game losing streak. They finally posted a win. They're 5-26, close out their season, end of the week with the University of Pacific. I don't know whether Steve Lavin, the head coach, perishes. This turns out to be just a really, really bad experience. But to circle back at the onset, ugly win. Last I checked, it's still a win. What do you thought about the Aztecs and the Cowboys?
Yeah, I think that sums it up. It was an ugly win. I mean, I've heard, what was it, Ziegler calling it a rock fight, or was you calling it a rock fight? I can't remember. But it was kind of a fugly game, especially with those 3 technicals in 38 seconds or whatever that was. But you just got to remember, they're not playing with their best player. There's no Magoon Gwath. Okay. You've got these kids at altitude, and it seemed like Farrell Compton didn't play as many minutes as I expected. I was wondering if the altitude was really affecting him. That kid Agbim for the Cowboys was just hitting shots from everywhere.
It depended on what 15-minute quadrant you're looking at, because he also played incompetently too.
Well, yeah, exactly.
But they're bigs. Wyoming's bigs kind of beat up on the Aztecs.
They did. Well, that was the thing is I love Jared Coleman-Jones, but he doesn't strike me as a tough guy, you know?
Warrior.
Yeah, he's not. But he's got a great offensive game, and he's adequate on defense. But one of the things I think is interesting is how they win the game on the road. They're expected to win by, I think it was 7.5. They win by 3, and yet they are negatively impacted in the, I don't know if it was the net or some other ranking, because they weren't meeting the expected point spread. So what's your take on all that?
I don't pay much attention to Ken Pom and net and all that. Mark Ziegler has 7,000 words. He writes about that every week. It's a little too complicated for those of us that don't like new math. Just show me what you got on the floor, and then we'll analyze what you got on the floor, where you did well, where you didn't do well. I don't lose my marbles over that, because there's another game to be played. And if they get to the tournament, who gives a crap where they are in the net? You still got to play the tournament games and play whoever's on that schedule in front of you. Don't worry about Ken Pom ratings and all of that. It's a nice conversation piece. It's nice for him to be able to do the research and to write about it. I don't pay much attention to it. I'm more concerned about their X's, their O's, their ability to survive adversity, and they did against Wyoming. But that being said, if it had been anybody else besides guys wearing brown and gold, they would have gotten blown into the parking lot in Laramie, and it's really cold out in Laramie right now.
And windy. But, survive and advance, okay? So now Tuesday on the road at Viejas East in Las Vegas, I expect another Aztec win, and at minimum a number 3 seed, maybe a 2 if the stars align.
In the Mountain West Conference
West Conference tournament.
If they get dinged at Vegas because it's at altitude against the rested Vegas team and a shorthanded Aztec team, if they get dinged, now they might be a 9th or a 10th national seed on the bubble, which creates problems for them. But we'll worry about that after we get through this next week of the Mountain West.
If they lose in Vegas, I mean, they're like probably last 4 in. I mean, I think that would be a damaging loss. And another side angle, you had talked about how they got a late trip out of town because of the airplane problems in Laramie. So they ended up leaving Sunday. Their game in Vegas is on Tuesday. So you think, well, why not just go from Laramie to Vegas, but they had to come back to San Diego on Monday because they were doing an NIL deal with the Blender sunglasses guys. And so the whole team had to be there. So imagine you're flying Sunday from Laramie to San Diego. You're going to this thing on Monday. You've got a bunch of practices to prepare for UNLV, and then you got to fly back to Vegas.
Yeah. Well, they did their video preparation while they were stuck back in the hotel in Laramie after the game. So they did a little bit, but not able to do walkthroughs, et cetera. So tough set of circumstances, but we'll see what Tuesday brings and what the final regular season game brings. You're an Aztec fan. An opinion. You like this team where it is? I mean, I think it's a great coaching staff. Huge challenge. I mean, what they did in New Mexico was phenomenal. What almost got done to them by Wyoming, lowly Wyoming, last place Wyoming, that just could have been dreadful. Okay, we go from college basketball. Let's talk NBA hoops.
NBA notebook, starting with the Timberwolves.
Yeah, the bad boys. The NBA's got bad boys in every corner of the league. Anthony Edwards, great guard, Minnesota Timberwolves, loses his mind on the court. Got a 16th technical foul, got ejected, abused the official walking off the court, took the basketball and threw it into the stands at a heckler. End result, 1-game suspension, loses game check, fined $35,000 for the interaction with a fan. The junk with Anthony Edwards just goes on and on and on. This is the new NBA. And if that's not enough, we'll talk Golden State. I saw a pregame video of this. Seth Curry has this regimen he does in pregame where he starts shooting jumpers beyond the foul line, beyond the head of the circle, then deeper from the head of the circle, then to the three-point line all the way around. I saw him hit 7 in a row like it was no big deal. Goes out in the game, scores 56, hit 12 threes in the game on Friday, Golden State. Wow. Amazing. Third one, Philadelphia. They've reached the finish line of the season for Joel Embiid. This is bad. He's making an enormous amount of money. He's had this chronic knee problem. He's already had 1 knee scope surgery. They've tried everything from acupuncture to plasma platelet injections. He just can't play. So they shut him down over the weekend. He's already missed 39 games. He'll wind up missing about 45 to 50 for the entire season. They are contemplating having to do another surgery to get inside that knee ailment that has plagued him since last spring. So he is gone for the season. Charlotte Hornets. Guess who's back in the NBA? Malachi Flynn.
Right on.
Charlotte Hornets signed him to a free agent contract. He had been at San Antonio's NBA G League team. Malachi was averaging 21 points, 5 rebounds, and 9 assists per game for the Austin Spurs. San Antonio did not sign him. Charlotte took him, and he is going to finish out the season with the Charlotte Hornets. And then there's Miami. You remember the whole mess with Miami Heat, Jimmy Butler, suspensions, trades, arrogance. So he gets traded to Golden State. And now we find out he just got sued for $400,000 in his final weeks at Miami. Living in a big state-of-the-art mansion, didn't pay the rent for 2 months, trashed the place before he left, sued for $400,000 in damages. Nice guy. These are the people representing Adam Silver's NBA, the Anthony Edwards and the Jimmy Butlers of the world. What a fiasco. What a situation that is.
Yeah, like a rent-free mansion and no joy for Jimmy Butler. I mean, that's unbelievable. I mean, that guy, I don't really know enough about his character, but what I hear ain't good. Yeah, but he's a local guy here in Poway. He's like owned property here. And I remember seeing him working out, or my son saw him work out at Poway High like 8 years ago during the off season. But to your point about Steph Curry, I've seen that thing where, he moves all the way back, hits all these shots. And you notice that and this seems rather obvious, but the further back he goes, the higher the arc on that shot, so that when it goes through the net, it's almost going straight down. And I was noticing that Luka does the same thing on his bombs. He hits from so far away.
Rainbows.
Yeah, they're huge rainbows, and rather than like a line drive. But Even Miles Bird is doing that with San Diego State. So when you think about it, when they're hitting those threes from that distance, like 3 or 4 feet beyond the line in the NBA, I mean, that's like a half court shot.
Yeah. I mean, mechanics and the ball spin, that there's a science to that. It's just not launching a shot, but it's the motion with the wrist. It's the ball coming off the reverse spin. It takes an enormous amount of work. And, Curry is the elite of any three-point shooter in modern-day basketball. We always thought that Pete Maravich was the greatest of all time, but those are mid-range jumpers. Although they didn't have the three-point line when Pete Maravich was doing it in New Orleans with the New Orleans Jazz. But what Curry has been able to do from all directions, just absolutely stunning. Okay, all things NBA. You want to talk about good guys or bad citizens, pro basketball? Jump on board. By the way, Lakers are rolling. I'm waiting for somebody to pile in and say, hey, shut your mouth. Because Luka, LeBron are playing really well right now. And my response is, they're playing really well right now, but you are playing injury-riddled, battered teams. You got to go to Boston. You still got to play Oak City. You still got bunches of games with Houston and Milwaukee. But so far, so good. Lakers right now, this is hard to believe. The Lakers are second in the Western Conference in the standings. Second.
Really?
That's absolutely amazing.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah. Oak City is number one. Lakers are way back of them, but at this point they're second. But I'm not going to shut my mouth yet. They still got games to play against really good teams.
Yeah. Here we go. And they just played back-to-back against the Clippers.
And the Clippers are caving in because of injuries.
Yeah, and then Kawhi is hobbling out there already. I mean, how's the knee doing for him?
He played 38 minutes and 40 minutes the last two games. That, to me, is way over the top. They were going to, quote, manage his minutes. In the last two games, they've asked him to stay on the court because they got so many people dinged up. I don't think that's good. Now, he's been productive. He had 30 points in the weekend game against the Lakers, but I just don't know with the wear and tear factor if that's really good for him having to play that many minutes.
Yeah, but I still love seeing him out on the court. He's a special character out there.
All things NBA, feel free to jump on board. Talk Lakers, talk about the bad boys. Are there any good guys left in pro basketball? Hey, we get to halftime. This podcast is brought to you by Dixie Line Lumber and Home Centers, 9 locations to serve you in San Diego. You got projects, these people can be your best friends. They have materials, they have lots of ideas, and they've got not only the Dixie Line Lumber setters, they've got showrooms that can show you some of the things you can buy. John, as you roll that video on Dixie Line, just tell people about the showroom that they can go observe.
Oh, yeah. The showroom is the design studio. It's in Solana Beach. There's a home center lumber yard right there. And then it's just like adjacent to it in the shopping center is the design studio. And yeah, you'll see those bathtubs that aren't kind of built in. They're like a separate bowl, and you'll see those kinds of sinks that sit on top of gorgeous countertops and bathrooms. So they've got all of the high end kind of European style faucetry there. Plus, beautiful doors and windows, that's what you can see in those showrooms. But all the other stores are lumber yards. They're home centers. They're like your local hardware store, and they help build San Diego.
Dixie Line Lumber, 9 locations to serve you. They have been in business for over 100 years. Go to dixieline.com, see all the things they've got to offer you. Okay, before we go to the second half, just a couple of reminders. When we are done with the topics on the table, you are going to carry the rest of this podcast. John, explain to all the people who are right now on live stream how they join us.
Okay, we already got a lot of you have already joined us. I mean, here I see Richard and John and Hitman, and who else is that? I Smash and RJM and David and Ral and Angel. XX Revolution, you're all on the list. We want to get more people in. So if you have a question or comment in the world of sports, as Lee said at the beginning of the show, if you have a take that doesn't suck, and I think I've heard that line before, drop it in the live chat on Facebook, YouTube, or on X.
And just a couple of other reminders. You like sports, please check my website, leehacksawhamilton.com. I write on it every day. It's there first thing in the morning. There's a big orange box on the homepage. You can join my insiders group. Just fill out that information. You'll get on our email list. Want you to share. Tell everybody in your Rolodex what we do Mondays and Thursdays at 1:30 p.m. Want you to subscribe to the YouTube channel. When you subscribe, you will also get the alerts for bonus coverage because we do put other things up on the YouTube channel on different days of the week in addition to doing what we're doing on live stream. You're on social media. Want you to join Hacksaw's All-Star team, my Twitter All-Star group. Just punch in my slug line at Hacksaw1090. hit the follow button at Hacksaw 1090. We are ready. We go to the second half, and we're going lots of different places at a real fast tempo. John?
At a real fast tempo. Okay, so let's get started here with a little bit about the Rams. This is big news.
First domino has fallen in the quarterback derby. We've been talking about this for weeks. The Rams gave Jimmy Sexton, the agent for Matthew Stafford, 1 calendar week to go into the marketplace, meet with other people, talk about what a contract with another team would look like. He met with the Raiders. Stafford met with Tom Brady personally. The Raiders, I was told, offered a 2-year deal of about $90 million total. That's about $45 million per season. Sexton talked to the New York Football Giants at the Combine in Indy. They made an offer somewhere between 90 and 100 million. Stafford and Sexton came back to the Rams over the weekend. Sean McVay met with Stafford at 6:30 in the morning on Saturday. He said, "What do you want to do?" The window's closing. Stafford agreed to stay in LA on a restructured deal. We don't know the terms of the total restructure. I'm led to believe it's probably 40 to 50 million the first year, half of it guaranteed, which is better than he got last year, with the idea this is a year-to-year thing. They'll address 2026 after 2025, and maybe there'll be the same contract offer, maybe a pay bump. If Stafford wants to continue to play, this becomes a 1-year rental. They never wanted him to leave. At the end of the day, they told the Raiders and they told the Giants, if you're open to trading for Matthew Stafford and then you can negotiate whatever you want to do with the contract, it must be a number 1. Nobody is going to trade a number 1 for a 37-year-old quarterback, even though his resume is really, really impressive. I was told the Raiders' offer might have been a 3 and maybe a 5th-round pick in another year, and the Rams, who didn't want to lose the guy, kept insisting on number 1. Well, I'm not trading my number 1 for a 37-year-old quarterback. So Stafford is back. That's great news as it relates to the Rams. And now that they got a cap figure for him, they go back, they sign the left guard, Alaric Jackson, to a 3-year deal. They're still going to move Cooper Kupp in another transaction somewhere with free agency beginning somewhere before the NFL draft. So that's I think that's really great news. He's a leader. He's a winner. He's a great citizen. And I think at the end of the day, if you look at the Raiders roster and you look at the New York Giants, are you going for a payday? Because you're surely not going for a chance to be a Super Bowl team. And I think in his heart, he had a tough time leaving McVay. In his heart, I think he had a tough time leaving the LA market because they're really good. And maybe they're a lot closer than anybody realizes. I know they're closer than the Raiders or the New York Giants are. So reaction to Stafford?
This finally makes sense that he's coming back to LA. But do you feel that he was disrespected in this process? Because Les Snead says, oh, we want a running quarterback, and then they had him on the trade market. It was like they were giving all these signals they were going to get rid of him. Now he comes back. I mean, he's got the contract, but this is a Super Bowl winning quarterback. It seems like there should be a better way for him to end his career.
I think there's a story behind the story. And from what I gather from what people have intimated to me, he gave them money back a year ago to help them with the cap. And the promise was made, after 2024, we'll sit with you and we'll pay you back for what you allowed us to do in 2024. And that's what this was all about. And their indication was, you go out and shop yourself for a week and just see what somebody else is willing to do. And they came back, and then bingo, all of a sudden, the Rams decided, we want you to stay. They never wanted him to go. We're willing to do this. We're going to bump you up, and we're going to give you between 40 and 50, and a larger chunk of this is guaranteed, and this will be a 1-year deal, and we'll revisit this next year if you wish to come back and play. So I think this was preordained, and the fact that they tagged a number 1 pick, they didn't want him to go, but they wanted to give him the freedom to look and see. Now, he could have accepted the Raider deal, and maybe the Rams and Raiders would have come to some agreement on draft pick compensation, but there's no way the Raiders are going to give up the 6th pick. There's no way the Giants are going to give up the 3rd pick to make that happen. So this is win-win for both. And again, my original statement, he's not going to an outpost that has no chance. He's back in LA where he's beloved, great relationship with the coach, an awful lot of talent around him.
Yeah. This is a no-brainer.
So that's where we are there. Next team we're talking about, the Bolts.
The Bolts, Chargers. Here's what we got.
Tell you what, very interesting week. A lot of comments about the general manager, what Joe Ortiz has said, and what the players had to say about Jim Harbaugh. And this is kind of a surprise story. Let me walk through this. Joe Ortiz, the general manager, goes to the combines. One sentence one day, he says, I can live with my salary cap with both Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack on one-year contracts. The next day, he's dropping hints that he just may not pay Joey Bosa $25 million. He may release him and get rid of the cap space. Then the next day, there are reports that not only are they talking about letting Bosa go, they're letting Gus Edwards, the tough guy running back, go, and letting the overpaid guard Trey Pipkins go. That would clear another $35 million to go on top of the $63 million in cap space they already have. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens by the first day of the league new financial year, which is March 10th. Chargers are going to make some transactions here. Now, what I don't understand, though, is the other story that filtered out of Indianapolis. They have the 20th pick in the first round. They desperately need offensive line support for the quarterback, Justin Herbert. They need a running back. Probably need some more defense. They spent a lot of time in interviews with the tight end from the University of Michigan, Cortland Loveland. You'd spend your number one pick at 20 on a tight end and not a really good offensive lineman? And then they met with Texas wide receiver Matthew Golden, whose stock has jumped. You're going to spend a number one on a wide receiver? I mean, the last number one wide receiver was Quentin Johnston. How'd that work out? And you're not going to go get a quality offensive lineman in front of your quarterback? And then they talked about Ashton Genty, Boise State, heavy-duty running back. But dude's not going to be there at number 20, which means you'd have to spend currency to trade inside maybe the top 10 picks to get him. And again, you're going to do that, get Genty, or get the tight end, or get the wide receiver, and you haven't solved the offensive line deficiency in front of Justin Herbert? I think, to me, is really strange. So three layers of storylines involving Joe Ortiz, the general manager. And the other story, last week on Friday, the NFL Players Association released a survey of all the players in the league who rated the organizations, rated the ownership, rated the coaches, etc. Jim Harbaugh was ranked 26th out of 32 coaches by his own players, 26th for player feedback. Players are upset that he does not take input from any of his players. It's his team. I understand it's his team trying to create his culture, but he was ranked 26th in terms of interaction with his players and listening to what his players have to say. And he was ranked 32nd and dead last in what they call time efficiency. And the players on the survey, the Charger players said, we're tired of listening to these speeches that go on and on about Shakespeare and quoting all this other stuff rather than talking football. Too many meetings going too long about non-football things. He'd be like one of your favorite professors at UCSD up on the hill. What the hell are you quoting Chaucer for in a team meeting? A lot of these guys don't know who Chaucer was. So I was really surprised at that. So respond to Ortiz and what's important versus what he's doing. And how would you have voted for Harbaugh?
Yeah, well, the Ortiz angle of it is, to me, they're just, it's like AJ Preller. They talk to everybody. They don't know what kind of trade offers people are going to make. And if suddenly there was a way to get in the top 10, well, why not have a plan and confirm who that would be? To me, these are all contingencies. Yeah, they got to get an offensive lineman. Absolutely. And probably defensive line if Mack and Bosa leave. But the other part about Harbaugh really surprised me because I always thought of him as a player's coach, and obviously he's not. I mean, clearly he's not. But a great leader is someone that knows how to motivate each of the teammates in their own special, individualized way. They get to know each player, get to understand their hot buttons. So why wouldn't you listen and incorporate some of those suggestions, if the good suggestions, of course, and try to integrate that just to prove to your players that you're listening to them and therefore kind of build a kind of a greater bond and culture.
Who the hell is Chaucer? Why are you quoting Shakespeare in a 45-minute meeting
Yeah.
that went on and on and on.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's him and his tent revivals, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what you always love talking about with him. But I think sometimes Harbaugh just likes hearing himself speak all the time. But
yeah, we know somebody else that does the same damn thing. Okay, so if you're into the NFL, you got a comment on the Chargers or prior topic, comment on the Rams. Hey, Fans Forum chat box is open. There is no excuse for you not to participate because we do sports talk the way it should be done. Third topic on the table, the rumor mill.
The rumor mill at the NFL Combines. What are you hearing, Lee?
Okay, let's just run through this. 49ers make their first off-season deletion from the roster. Deebo Samuel gets traded to the Washington Commanders for only a 5th-round draft pick. This guy is a talent. This guy's had injuries. This guy's had attitude issues. This guy is no longer a 49er. End of the day, I just think Kyle Shanahan was tired of the act. He goes to Washington, which for a 5th-round pick, I think that's a great upgrade because that gives Jaden Daniels somebody to put on the other side of Terry McLaurin. I think this is a pretty good acquisition for a 5th-round pick, and they got the cap space to take on the final year of his contract. His cap number is pretty significant at $25 million, but San Francisco was just tired of the act. Got to keep him healthy, multi-dimension guy. I think that's a good upgrade for Washington. New York Giants shut out on the Stafford trade conversation. Meeting with Aaron Rodgers and his agent. That's item 1. Meeting with Sam Darnold when he becomes a free agent effective this Friday. The question is, he wants $35 million per season. Which is the real Sam Darnold, the one that did really, really well the first 13 weeks of the season, or the one that hit bumps in the roads as the Vikings got ejected from postseason? That'll be interesting to see where that goes. Third one, Raider Nation. They're not part of the Matthew Stafford situation. Here's the report that I get at this hour. The Raiders initially, I was told, went to New England and said, we'd trade you 6 and 36, first and a third. You give us your 4th pick so we can get Shedeur Sanders. Now I hear the offer might be a 6th, and the other tight end on the other side, Michael Mayer, kid out of Notre Dame. I think he's a pretty good football player. 6 and Michael Mayer to get to Shedeur Sanders. I don't think New England wants they take Mayer, but they still want something else. So maybe it turns out to be the 6th pick and maybe a 5th-round pick and Mayer to make that jump up. Other thing, and I don't understand this because you only get so many visits at the Combine. The Raiders had long meetings with Jalen Milroe, the quarterback at Alabama, who I thought was going to be a Heisman candidate coming off back-to-back really good years at Bama under Nick Saban, who totally fell apart at the back end of last season when the Crimson Tide went down the drain with Kalen DeBoer. I'm not quite sure that guy is a quarterback of the future. They may see great athlete. Chip Kelly may see great athlete. But the fact that he played so poorly, interceptions, lousy passing percentage, fumbles, why would you do that? You're not going to draft him in the 1st or 2nd round. But anyhow, that's what the Raiders did. Next one is Philadelphia. They are knocking at the door in Cleveland, and they're not going away. Cleveland is got salary cap problems like you wouldn't believe. Philadelphia has offered 2 number 1s and one of their offensive linemen to the Cleveland Browns for Myles Garrett. And why would you not do that if you're Cleveland? You got a crisis at quarterback with Deshaun Watson. You get an additional number 1. You're going to get cap relief when you move Garrett off your roster. Now, granted, you're losing a great, great football player, but they got to fix that. They got so many problems in Cleveland. And Philadelphia, they got an awful lot of currency they can use. So that'll be interesting there. And then the last one is the University of Texas. You know, we went through the 4 days of the Combine. Steve Sarkisian said he was overwhelmed with NFL people coming to talk to him privately about his kids. His kids tested off the charts at the Indianapolis Combine. And quarterback Quinn Ewers, who had been a starter for a year and a half, he threw 67 touchdown passes in a year and a half. He's really elevated himself. He might be a 2nd round, top of the 2nd round quarterback. I don't think he's a 1st rounder, but they're asking about Ewers. They asked about Matthew Golden, who had the top 40 time of any of the sprint guys and played really well in the most important games of the season. Their running back, Jaden Blue, who only was a rotation guy. He had the top 40 time of all the running backs. And then one of their other wide receivers did very well too. So it's interesting. Suddenly, Isaiah Bond, Texas is got all the skill guys. And Sarkisian says this is just absolutely amazing. How many NFL people came to me to talk about the specifics of my players, and I didn't even mention their right tackle, who might be the first or second offensive lineman to go inside the top 10 in the draft. The University of Texas, just a power, and they just kind of took over the whole draft combine. So, John, talk about the 49ers, talk about those with quarterback problems and what the hell the Browns are going to do.
The Browns, they're in trouble. They got to deal Myles Garrett. And imagine that. The Eagles with even better defensive linemen up there. I want to talk about the Raiders. And I like what I'm hearing on these trade talks about moving up. And, both of those deals sound good. I mean, because they've obviously got, what's the other guy, tight end the Raiders have? Is it Brock, or what was his name?
Brock Bowers.
Brock Bowers. Yeah. So, and the other kid, the Notre Dame kid, they're thinking of trading. He's really good too. So they had two good pillars. But imagine, if you will, that the Raiders are, for whatever reason, are unable to trade up into getting Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. Then might they trade down and then maybe pick up Milroe or Quinn Ewers in the second or third round and kind of make that a project? And then it sort of makes me wonder, what's the ranking order of the quarterbacks in the draft, and where does Dylan Gabriel fit in that mix?
Well, right now, obviously, Sanders, Cam Ward are 1-2. Jackson Dart, who had an unbelievable statistical season at Ole Miss, I think has pushed himself into the back part of the first round. But you'd have to scout him and make sure that this is the right guy. I think Ewers has now elevated himself. I was told his meetings were dazzling with the teams, and he worked out pretty well. Has pushed himself into the second round. After that, I've not heard a lot. Dylan Gabriel is undersized. Dylan Gabriel, I think, is more of a systems quarterback. Justin Herbert was a systems quarterback at Oregon. The only thing is, Dylan Gabriel might be just a shade over 5'10". That's a smaller size quarterback. Now, Russell Wilson has had a great career, and he was just right at the 5'11" barrier. Gabriel thinks. But I think Gabriel will probably be maybe a third or a fourth-round draft pick. They may see something unique in Milroe from Alabama. I don't see it because he faltered so badly. That doesn't mean you can't spend a third-round pick or a fourth-round pick as somebody down road, but they're still going to need a quarterback. By the way, they just got rid of Desmond Ridder yesterday. They told him he's not being offered a contract extension, and we're waiting for them to release Gardner Minshew. They might be the only team on the planet with zero quarterbacks on their roster by Friday. So the Raiders going to be pretty significant in terms of moves.
Isn't it interesting how you refer to Dylan Gabriel as a systems quarterback, and then you mentioned even Justin Herbert, and they're both Oregon guys, and then Bo Nix also systems quarterback who did hella good with Denver.
The difference is, Justin Herbert's 6'6". Dylan Gabriel's a shade over 5'10".
Well, yeah, but Dylan Gabriel can win games, and we've seen him. His trajectory has gone up. He's clearly not a number one pick, but I'm just curious to see where he lands because he's a guy I've followed.
Yeah, well, I would think Gabriel might be a third or fourth rounder at best. I'd take Gabriel over the athlete that Milroe is, but again, maybe they see things that they can develop and take the flaws out of Milroe's game. But he faltered so badly on the back end of the season down at Alabama. I mean, I was staggered at how poorly he played. But then again, that Bama lost a lot of players in the Nick Saban era, and DeBoer didn't have Nick Saban's roster.
Well, the Raiders have had good luck drafting quarterbacks from Alabama. How about Kenny the Stabler?
Yeah, but that was 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, that was.
Okay, all things NFL. You want to respond to some of them? Fans Forum chat box is open. Speaking of football, let's talk about this, because this story has not gone away.
Yeah, this is the lawsuits here with Pac-12 and the Mountain West.
Okay, there's a huge issue. As you know, the Pac-12, the rebirth of the Pac-12, taking the five top schools, Boise State, San Diego State, amongst them to join in 2026. Anyhow, later they took then Utah State, Colorado State. Well, as part of the agreement, the Pac-12 agreed that there would be a buyout fee. The Mountain West bylaws said, if you leave our conference, you must pay us $17 million. Well, each of the schools, the Aztecs, Boise State, they agreed. They're going to pay $17 million exit fee over a 5-year span. But then the Mountain West put in, if there's anybody else that leaves, you have to pay $10 million apiece. And if there's more than one that goes, the second one pays more than the first one that goes. If there's a third one that goes, you have to pay more. Well, Utah State, Colorado State then filed a lawsuit. Said you can't charge us a $17 million exit fee and then tag on $10 million more. And they filed this lawsuit. The Mountain West, trying to make this thing stand up in court, has decided they would go to arbitration. And I'll be interesting. I'm sorry, I cut class the day they taught law at Ohio University to go drinking uptown. But you tell me, do they have a right to impose a $10 million poaching fee on top of the $17 million exit fee from the schools that are leaving the Mountain West Conference?
Well, it depends what the contract says. So, but that does seem like double dipping, you know. But it's amazing that we had these teams scrambling, switching conferences to get more revenue, but they're burning so much money with lawyers here. It makes you wonder how much they're going to actually, you know, make up.
Just absolutely stunning story.
These two conferences just merge and then maybe shed, you know, a few of the lesser schools and just move forward.
It's nasty because Vegas is still out there and the Pac-12 is still looking at Vegas. So Vegas gets dragged into this too. They can pay $17 million plus $10 million as a poaching fee on top of it. I'll be intrigued to see how this arbitrator works this whole thing out. So you're into college athletics, feel free to join us. Next topic on the table, corner kick me this one.
Yeah, this was a big night in San Diego.
Oh, historic night. San Diego Football Club wound up in a soccer term, 0-0, 0-0 for English people, 0-0 tie with St. Louis. All-time record, 34,506 at Snapdragon Stadium. It was just electric. It wound up being a tie, but it feels like a loss because they lost their top goal scorer. Chuke Lozano came off in the 29th minute. They fear he has a torn hamstring, and that is really significant. They dominated St. Louis. Their time of possession was 71 minutes. Now, St. Louis had more shots on goal. SDFC just didn't get a lot of good scoring opportunities. In fact, they wound up playing 90 minutes, had one shot on goal in the whole game. Of course, Lozano was gone for a large segment of the game. What happened at the end of the game was really ugly. A certain contingent of fans, and this has become a big situation in Mexico, Mexican soccer, homophobic slurs, these chants that soccer fans have used in Mexico, and FIFA has fined the Mexican teams and the Mexican national team tons of money, but you can't control these fans in the stands. Homophobic slur. Every time the St. Louis goalkeeper went to kick it back or roll it out, these fans at the end of the game got into this chant. And it really took the glow off the opening night for SDFC. Ownership was upset. Coach Mikey Veras was really upset. He lectured the fans. The general manager said, we will bar fans from our games. Don't come to our games. But how are you going to police it in 34,000? How are you going to know where it's coming from? And again, I'm sorry to say, but in Mexico, Mexican fans, this has become a way of life. I think it's distasteful. I can't tell you what the exact words they used, but it's got to do with homosexuality. And they did it to the St. Louis goalkeeper throughout the second half, the late second half of the game. And it kind of tarnishes the image. I don't know how SDFC can police that going forward. It has to come from fans in the stands. And I don't think fans in the stands are going to turn in your brother-in-law because he's chanting that to the St. Louis goaltender. But nothing tie, but it kind of feels like a loss, which is too bad. And they're going to have to replace Lozano. And I've said all along, I was really concerned, do they have enough goal scoring? And they're going to have to find a way to go get more goal scoring.
Yeah. It did feel kind of like a loss. You know, that story about the homophobic chant was on the front page of the Associated Press's website. Yes. Not just in the sports section, in the overall news section. So this is a national story. And these people are dummies. I mean, why are you doing this, especially in this whole world of like wokeism that's going on around America? People at least should be smart enough to, you know, not chant that sort of thing. That's idiotic. But I applaud Mikey Veras because in that press conference, he condemned it in English and in Spanish. And in the stadium, they condemned it on the big screen.
Put it up 3 times.
And the PA announcer. I mean, so they took swift action. Okay.
How are you going to control it?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's got to be sort of like crowd policed, you know?
Self-policing.
Yeah, I think the crowd's got to shut down the other crowd when they do that. But you're right. It took the glow off the game. But, you know, Machado is there. I mean, San Diego was celebrating this day, starting at like tailgates at 10 in the morning. I mean, this was a big deal for San Diego soccer fans that have been waiting so long.
When those fans walked in with that band with the drummers hours before the game, that was so cool.
Yes. Yeah, this is what makes it great. I'm so happy for San Diego to have an MLS team. I'm thrilled. I looked in the standings. I guess they're in fourth position right now.
1-0-1.
Yeah, but you're right. They had possession for like over 2/3 of the game, and they could just never quite punch it in. And yeah, when Chucky was out of the game, it was even harder for them to move the ball, you know, in the front court.
Okay, you're a soccer fan. Feel free to jump on board. Fans Forum chat box is open. We do sports talk the way it should be. That's why we cover all these topics on the table. Hockey hotline is available.
Okay, yeah. We're bunching the hockey with the IndyCar and Man City.
Yeah, we got an awful lot of stuff to talk about. Let's just run through this. NHL trading deadline is Friday. 3 major trades this weekend already. The Blackhawks got rid of former number 1 draft pick defenseman Seth Jones. He went to the Florida Panthers for number 1 and goaltender Spencer Knight. Colorado, which had already made trades earlier in this midseason, makes another deal to get tough guy defenseman Ryan Lindgren and veteran forward Jimmy Vesey. They come from the New York Rangers in a 4-for-2 deal. Nashville, Gustav Nyquist, goal scorer, goes to Minnesota. Minnesota Wild have been battered by injury, so they're just holding on for dear life. The next question, what happens between now and the trade deadline on Friday? Do the Ducks trade veteran goaltender John Gibson or the young center iceman Trevor Zegras? What happens with the Kings? They're desperately in need of another goal scorer. Do they trade one other young defenseman to try to get a sniper? Vancouver is shopping Brock Besser, former 40-goal scorer. Canucks are just tearing their franchise apart. They're hanging on for dear life in the playoff mode. Pittsburgh, I think there's going to be a trade there. Won't be Sidney Crosby. They're talking about dealing Ricard Raquel. That's a veteran goal scorer. Used to be with the Ducks. Pretty good player. They're also trying to trade the big money contractor defenseman Erik Karlsson. Islanders got young defenseman Brock Nelson. He could be moved. Edmonton is trying to trade the big money contract of the controversial left winger Evander Kane, who's been out. And Buffalo, which has had a miserable season, is shopping Dylan Cousins. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens between now and by the time we join you at the end of the week. Last year, there were 43 trades made at the NHL trading deadline. So I think you're going to be some movement. You know, we talked extensively about the Four Nations Cup and how cool that was and the TV ratings and all that. Price to be paid. Matthew Tkachuk, Florida Panthers, gone for the rest of the season now. Torn groin, suffered in the Cup. And by the way, there were 8 major injuries of players. Not one of those players has returned to the ice yet post Four Nations tournament. So there was a price to be paid there. Auto racing. Hey, you're a good old boy. Understand being a redneck, NASCAR fan, all that. Good old boys. Obviously, Formula One's going to start in 2 weeks, so we'll be paying attention to that. IndyCar racing started Sunday, Grand Prix of St. Petersburg. And this is the next wave of superstars on the IndyCar circuit. Alex Palou, absolutely ballsy race. He was a leader. He got caught in lap traffic, and he was getting pressed from behind by the second and third place drivers. And they were riding his tail on the road course in St. Pete's. He got caught in lap traffic and said, what the hell? Is he going to pass this guy? Is this guy going to pull over and let him go? Is he going to wreck trying to get around him? He got around him. And he wound up outrunning Joseph Newgarden, who then got caught by Scott Dixon. I mean, these final 3 guys on the final 5 laps, it was just spectacular. Alex Palou wins. Meanwhile, the other big story in IndyCar racing, you know, we've been talking about Michael Andretti, Cadillac F1, going to Formula One. Andretti has taken a team to Formula One, going to be based out of England. They're talking to Colton Herta, bright young driver here in the U.S., about being their American driver. They're also talking about signing European driver Valtteri Bottas to be part of Andretti's Cadillac F1 team. And one other note in soccer. This involves Manchester City, which is having a bit of a bumpy ride because they've been devastated by injuries. La Liga, which is the league, the governing body for Spanish soccer, has filed documents in a lawsuit with the English Premier League that Manchester City has run an illegal operation, and they want sanctions against Manchester City for violations of expenditures everywhere. And they provided this documentation to what's called the European Union, which governs soccer investigations. They filed documentation that Manchester City, which has all these business entities under their soccer umbrella, has been hiding all these illegal expenses to different companies' budgets under that umbrella. So they're talking about training expenses, doctors' expenses, bonus expenses, marketing side deals that all been hidden. Manchester City could be in a huge world of hurt if everything that La Liga in Spain presented to the European Union. So stay tuned for that. You know, everybody's got, in essence, a salary cap in soccer. Well, they're saying Manchester City has just violated this and violated it by hiding the expenses under their marketing company, under their youth programs budgets. It's absolutely stunning. Anyhow, those are other topics on the table. Have you been traded yet? Will you be here on Thursday for Thursday podcast, or might you be traded?
Yeah, I'm going to probably be traded in 97.3 or something. I'll be in the back room. Hey, this is interesting with Man City. We've been hearing a lot about these expenses and the funny money and the different cash flows that they've got. But, you know, there are, like in baseball, we've got teams like the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Red Sox that they have additional revenue streams from their TV packages. You know, some of the fans are saying, well, you know, the Dodgers are really good at investing their money, so they get a return on the investment, and that can be used to fund some of these additional player salaries or pay for luxury taxes. So in the end, it's business enterprises beyond the scope of the team. But it's weird how in some leagues it's okay and other leagues it's not okay.
But you have, in baseball, you have luxury tax. And then you file all these contracts, and you can defer, because the Dodgers have done that. And if Guggenheim wants to spend $383 million as ownership of the Dodgers, they can. That can be all documented, because it goes through the Players Association and goes through Management Council. I'll give you a different example, though. Red Sox are owned by Fenway Sports Group.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, take what I'm saying here and then apply it to the Manchester City umbrella. Fenway Sports Group owns English Premier League Liverpool.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Fenway Sports Group owns NASCAR team. So if Fenway Sports Group was spending money in marketing bonus clause contracts that went to baseball players, but they were putting it under the NASCAR budget or under the budget of the English Premier League team, that would be illegal as Major League Baseball views it. So,
well, that would be illegal from an accounting perspective as well.
Exactly. So that's what Manchester City's being accused of. I'm trying to put it into American language. If somebody here like Fenway Sports Group that owns all these other entities tried to hide money by saying, no, this expenditure goes to NASCAR. It doesn't go to Major League Baseball and the Red Sox.
Yeah, you see, this is tricky. You know, you need a forensic accountant to get in there.
I told you shouldn't have cut accounting class that day.
Exactly. But you know, it's one thing, you know, they can take the money and they can allocate it and put it into a different bucket. But in the end, baseball says you can spend whatever you want to spend.
You're going to get taxed.
So you're going to get taxed. But these other leagues, they have a hard cap. So then they have the incentive to hide the expenses.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's where we are. Okay. We have put topics on the table. We're doing sports talk the way it should be done. Now it's your turn to do sports talk the way you want to do it. We're going to open up the Fans Forum chat box now. Want you to pile on board. This podcast is brought to you by Dixie Line Lumber and Home Centers, 9 locations to serve you in San Diego County. Projects in the home, projects at work, projects on the back patio by the pool. Feel free. Talk to them. Dixie Line Lumber. And just go to the website, dixieline.com. You'll see what they've got to offer to you. John, Fans Forum chat box is open. Yeah, we might be here till Wednesday. Go ahead.
Yeah, here we go. Okay, let's go to David. And he says, Pete Rose should be allowed in the Hall of Fame. Being an a-hole, cheating others, and committing fraud is the latest rage.
Nice shot. Yeah, I hate to say it, Pete Rose checked off a lot of those boxes, but I just don't think you can tell the story of Major League Baseball. But you didn't answer the second question, though, David. If you let Pete Rose in based on all the junk that he did, what do you do for Shoeless Joe Jackson back in the day? What do you do with the steroid cheats, the Bonds and the Clemens, etc.? Again, you can argue with me, Lee, you can't tell the story about baseball's history without incorporating Barry Bonds, what was it, 756 home runs, whatever the hell it was, or Roger Clemens strikeouts and Cy Young awards and all that. Tough call. Baseball open a Pandora's box if they do this?
Sort of. I mean, because we've been debating this for decades, this whole thing. But I'm just trying to think if any, like does the NFL or the NBA, have they ever blacklisted certain players like this, or is it just baseball?
No, I don't think they've blacklisted people, but bad people don't get votes. And people who got in then got themselves in trouble, a.k.a. O.J. Simpson, don't get taken out of the Hall of Fame. But anybody that walks into Canton and sees O.J. Simpson's bust understands what a slimeball of a person he was and what he was involved in.
Yeah,
well, a tough call.
It is. And, we just had the Oscars, last night. And you're thinking, well, would they ever take away an Oscars award because someone did something scummy? It's just weird how Major League Baseball seems like they kind of are kind of all high and mighty, got their nose in the air about this. But then on the same time, they have a Pete Rose exhibit in the Hall of Fame.
Okay, what are we doing about Shoeless Joe?
It's a hypocrisy. Yeah, let in Shoeless Joe. Bring him in, tell the story. But wag your finger at Shoeless Joe for what he did wrong, but still do it.
Okay, put an asterisk on the plaque. I agree with you. Although I thought Pete Rose was so out of control as a person, but that's who he was. Was he a great player? Hell yes, but I thought, a really bad person.
Just as an aside on the Shoeless Joe thing, I'm watching this new show on Max, and it's called Boardwalk Empire. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
And it takes place during, the late 19 teens and into the 20s during Prohibition. And part of the show, one of the attorneys was, or one of the gamblers got associated with the White Sox scandal. And so it's interesting how they integrated real life history into this fictional show. Yeah. And so baseball kind of makes its way in different ways.
Side note, baseball, if you're a baseball fan, you got Netflix, or go find it. Watch the movie 8 Men Out. That phenomenal historical perspective with a lot of star people in it. 8 Men Out, about the Black Sox scandal of 1919. If you like baseball, this is something you ought to see. Okay, we move on. David, thanks for the input. Go ahead, John.
Okay, let's go here to Angel. And he says, it will always be California Angels, that the name we grew up with, although I don't mind Anaheim.
I like California Angels. That's historical. That was Autry, which was a pretty classy operation. That was good days. But this whole thing is not about how I market the name and what does the logo or the new set of jerseys look like. This is about, can you fix the roster, and can you make this owner, who wants to be in the number 2 market in the country, spend up? I mean, Tony Clark really, he hit Artie Moreno with a broadside of criticism. But I want to see Tony Clark do the damn same thing to the guy in Miami, because I think that is an outrage. And obviously the Athletics and the Pirates and Detroit and all that. And maybe that's going to change once we get to the collective bargaining agreement. But California Angels is okay by me, but I want to see a better product on the field.
Yeah, of course, you got to start there. You need better players. You need to make the right investment. You need some good luck. You haven't had that either. The California Angels, I always just think of Nolan Ryan, don't you?
Sure.
And
Frank Tanana.
Yeah, and the cap logo, did they have the one that was an A with the halo?
They sure did.
That was the big A. And then there was another time they had the state of California emblem. Maybe they had on the sleeve. But it's interesting too, is there are very few teams that don't have a city name or a state name. Now, actually, California Angels is a state, but I'm thinking like New England Patriots. It's just it's like a region.
Yes.
Back then, I don't know if people in Sacramento were rooting for the California Angels because they were California, but it's just an interesting concept. And maybe it brings back golden ages of California when it was a greater place.
Angels did not want to respond to what Tony Clark had to say. I guess I understand why, because probably what he said was pretty damn truthful. Okay, move on. Next question.
Okay, moving on. And here's another comment about Pete. And this is from RJM. Pete sealed his fate the minute he gambled on baseball. He knew the rules as a player and knew the rules as a manager. Pete did this to himself. He doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, that's a mouthful from RJM. That's okay. He signed the document. Then 7 years, 9 years later, he promptly asked to be allowed to have the document rescinded, and the commissioners said, absolutely not. But at the end of the day, his memorabilia is in the hall. So if his memorabilia is there, should his name and his plaque be there? It's a tough emotional call. But yeah, the rules are the rules, and he really violated the rules. And I'm led to believe there is documentation that he bet on games as a player because he was an addicted gambler.
Yeah, yeah. And you've been reading that story about the Fresno State basketball
Yes.
players. So they're betting on their own games there.
Yeah, they were betting on we're going to win and we're going to win by this much, etc. But Pete Rose said he just bet on his team to win. We don't know what's factor fiction totally.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Just move on. Let's go. Let's keep going here. Angels talk. This is what I Smash. He goes, has Tony used his brain cells? Angels have about 60 to 70 million on the injured list.
Well, I concur with you. As he sat there and he beat up Artie Moreno, one of his clients was a druggie big time. I mean, I don't see him stepping forward and saying Josh Hamilton ought to give Artie Moreno all the money back that he took because he kept relapsing from drug problems and he finally walked away from baseball. He still got paid. So, Tony Clark needed to put the other piece of the equation in. Rendon, I don't think is a bad dude. Rendon has just got bad injury problems, and yet that's a phenomenal contract too. And again, that's the short-circuiting of Artie Moreno's impulsiveness, giving Pujols what he gave him. And Pujols is a great gentleman and has had a great career, but he was on a down cycle statistically, and Artie still signed him, I think, for $245 million over a 10-year contract, which was crazy. And he didn't get equal value off that investment. So, Tony can condemn Moreno as to what he's paying right now as of breakfast this morning, but there's other things that Artie did out of impulse that didn't work out. He's got to give Artie a little bit of credit there. And then obviously the tragedies with Skaggs and the drugs and the terrible drunk driving death of Nick Edenhart being an innocent victim. So yeah, they've been cursed, but Tony Clark is dealing with the here and now today. And that's why he was really critical.
Yeah, you should be critical. But isn't it interesting how baseball has that guaranteed contract that's not available in almost any other sport? Mm-hmm. And even corporate contracts as an employee, if you sign a 2-year, 3-year deal, there's still like an escape clause and a way you can be bought out. They're not going to let you go and have to pay you to sit at home for 3 years.
Well, if somebody got suspended for life as a third-time steroid abuser, for example, PED, maybe that would void the contract. If somebody gets arrested for murder, that violates a clause in the contract about morals.
Right.
But for the most part, bad citizens still get to walk away with their money for the most part.
Yeah. It's I just think the players union did a remarkable job getting that ability to have those guaranteed deals. Because to me, it's outrageous in some of these crazy cases.
They got them protections for a lot of things, and probably rightfully so in 4 out of every 5 cases. But there are the Josh Hamilton cases there that have to be offended by.
Did you see the note earlier today about Yu Darvish saying he might not finish the rest of his contract, and if he does, he would just walk away? He wouldn't demand to be paid for the years he doesn't pitch.
Unique and classy guy if he wishes to retire at age 40.
Yeah, interesting story.
Yeah. All right, we move on. Thank you.
Okay, let's talk Aztec basketball with Hitman. He goes, San Diego State University will get whacked in the first round. Not playing complete basketball right now.
Well, a lot depends whether or not Guatha's back. If Guatha's back, it's a very different team. But at the end of the day, if he's not ready because of the hyperextension of the knee, this becomes an enormous challenge. And let's understand it. They're not going to be playing at Viejas Arena. I know they've had all this history of success at Thomas and Mack. But, maybe they win a first-round game against a lesser team, but once they get in the Final Four, it's going to be a challenge because then you're playing really good people. You're playing Utah State, and you're playing some of the others. And if you don't have Guath, then you're half a team in terms of your bigs. So, Heidi, Coleman Jones, they just have to play beyond what they've shown over the course of the season. The guards have to play what they have shown they can play in terms of perimeter defense, and then they got to hit shots along the way. But that's not a slam dunk if Guatha's not there. If Guatha's there, then they have a chance maybe to get to the finals against Utah State, and then you see.
Yes, if Guatha's there, I think they have a very good chance to run the table in the Mountain West tournament. But I think, here to Hitman's point, if they make it to March Madness, yeah, they could be one and done, and especially if they get one of the last 4 in, you got to go to Dayton for those play-in games.
Sure.
That could be a tough road. Yeah, it all depends on Guath. But they have made, I think, like the semifinals, like some ridiculous number of times in a row.
Well, they've done that, John, with the bulk of the roster being fourth, fifth, or even in some cases sixth year guys. You know, all those COVID kids, they got that extra year. They stayed. And so this is different. This is as young a roster, I think, as Brian Dutcher has had since he took over as head coach. And yet they got 20 wins. It's not the same Mountain West as it was a year ago when 6 teams went to the tournament. I'm a little bit surprised that they've not grown collectively as a team, because historically under Brian Dutcher, Aztec basketball would get better and better and better as we went deeper into the season. And this thing has been really, really erratic. And now the big guys hurt.
Yeah, they're young. You know, you got to give them some for that. And I think amongst the players, amongst the teams that are in contention for the March Madness, they're probably the youngest team. So what they're doing is great. I mean, Dutcher is a magician. Yep. As much as we thought Fisher was wonderful, Dutcher's taken it to a whole new level.
Yeah, his X's and O's philosophy, especially in the face of adversity, what he did in New Mexico, I just never thought that was possible, as shorthanded as they were, but they manned up. They did some really unique things. But that was a one-time thing. And then they go to Wyoming, and they should have torched those guys, because those guys, they don't have any athletes, and they got mugged. And they probably could have lost that game. Should have lost that game.
Well, yeah, that could have happened. I mean, but I think they were behind by 3 at halftime. But wasn't it crazy, all those technical fouls? And some of them seemed like the refs were overreacting. Didn't you think that?
Well, we don't know what, those players have a tendency to be kind of mouthy. This is the mouthiest team I think Dutcher's ever had. And then Dutcher lost his mind. I thought Dutcher was going to get ejected. He came out on the court. I mean, he was as red-faced as the
Did you read his
hoodie.
lips?
Yeah.
WTF.
He did not use the King's best English, and no. I'm sure the players weren't using the King's best English either. Okay, thanks for the Aztec comment. We'll see. We'll worry about March Madness once we get through Mountain West Conference tournament. John, next one.
Okay, let's go to Richard. He goes, Fans Forum. He goes, it's about time the Padres need to focus on their own task at hand and stop talking about the Dodgers. Manny's comments about taking down LA, never mind, he was a no-show in the NLDS.
Well, he's been kind of streaky, over the course of his career, making all that kind of money. I mean, he was the one that made the comment to me about, just read the back of my baseball card. Well, yeah. Well, the back of your baseball card shows 2 unbelievable failures as the captain of this team. The crap season, what year was it? 23 or 22? Which was the year in which they grossly underachieved? 23.
Yeah.
So that, and then you got 24 straight shutout innings against the Dodgers when this was supposed to be the year maybe you could be a World Series team, and that happened. So that happened on Manny's watch to Manny's team. So we need to hold him a little bit responsible instead of cheerleading everything is great. Everything's not totally great, but the window's tight. I think if this front 4 of the starting rotation, and I'm catching a lot of heat. I've read some of the heat I'm taking. This front 4, I think, is pretty good. And we broke it down last week. I think of all the starters in Major League Baseball, their front 4 is probably the 5th best in baseball. You got the Dodgers, you got the Yankees. No one's paying attention to the starting rotation of the Arizona Diamondbacks, which I think is really good. I think the Padres have the 5th best top 4. But they get anybody hurt from that group, they're in a world of trouble, because outside of Waldron and maybe Kolek, and we got to see if he can pitch in the real season as a guy of the rotation, they don't have a lot of insurance policy guys there. If anybody gets hurt from that top group, Yu Darvish and Dylan Cease, Michael King, and even Pivetta, any of those guys get dinged, and the Padres are in real trouble. But on paper right now, I think the 5th best starting staff in all of Major League Baseball, because I broke every staff down when I did a research piece that we talked about this past week.
Yeah. I mean, they have a great staff, but remember, 2 of the top 4 are in the NL West, according to your ranking.
Yeah,
with the
Dodgers D-backs.
Yeah, so that's a tough road to go. But, this whole notion about the Padres, are they talking about the Dodgers? Well, the MLB network, they're doing the tour of the training camps. They're doing like 2 teams a day. Well, that they constantly ask the players, "Oh, what do you think about the Dodgers are doing?" And they were asking Mike Schill, do you feel intimidated by the amount of money that the Dodgers? And Mike Schill says no, and it was like a quick no. He goes, "We're worried about our guys," And the same thing, they ask Manny and they ask Fernando, and they're trying to stay focused on their own team. but the media just constantly throw gas on the fire.
Well, but that's the media's job, is to go get answers to the story. What's its story? I mean, Dodgers, payroll, and if you want to take it one step farther, evil umpire. They're just doing their job. That's what I do. I ask them all the same questions.
Right, yeah. So the thing is that the Padres can't win for losing, so they want to talk about themselves. They keep being asked about the Dodgers.
Just go play the game. Is it opening day yet? We're getting there. March, Dodgers, Cubs, Japan. I think it's March 23rd, 24th. That's going to be cool.
Yeah, that's like, what, 2.5, 3 weeks, right?
Exactly.
Nice.
Okay, we move on.
Okay, let's go here to John. And he says, MLB and pro sports might not want their players gambling, but they sure seem to like the revenue it brings in. Going to Cap One Arena to see a Caps or Wizards game, and they have a sports book in the arena. Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa did a lot to save baseball after a strike. We allow guys convicted of drug smuggling in the hall. I remember Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle being banned for taking PR jobs at a casino. It's all a bit hypocritical to me.
Yeah. He's not the first one, but that's a very potent, is that an adjective or an adverb? Hypocritical. That's a very potent statement about, sponsorships. Give me your casino money, sponsorships. But geez, I hope none of our guys show up in the casino on a road trip and blow money or get involved with gamblers to pay off gambling debts. It's a risk that everybody's taking, as witnessed by your comment about the mess at Fresno State or the trauma down at the University of New Orleans. It's really hard to police players in their private time, and some of these people, stupid as they are getting involved with gamblers.
Yeah, and I remember Tulane had that point shaving scandal.
Sure.
That was a long time ago.
Way back, Fresno State, Jerry Tarkanian, that was a terrible scandal.
Yeah, but I think in the end, sports just has to acknowledge the new reality that gambling is a part of reality. It's heavily integrated in the sport. It fuels interest in the sport. Accept it, but still police the players so it doesn't turn into the World Wrestling entertainment.
Yeah, I think there have been 9 baseball players. Now, a whole bunch of them have been minor leaguers, have been suspended in the last 2 years. A couple of them, the Padre was a Padre minor leaguer, suspended for life. So, yeah, it's out there. But if the sanctions get steep enough and you start to nail big names for what they've done wrong, now it sends a message. But yet, the world says we need to put Pete Rose back in the Hall of Fame on the ballot.
Yeah, he does. He belongs in.
Okay.
Let's go here down the list. We'll go to Gordon. He goes, hi, Lee and John. Watching and listening from Las Cruces, New Mexico. Great show as always. Thanks for bringing up New Mexico State and some of your sports updates.
Well, tough time. Aggies have gone through a real tough time. Lobos have gone through a tough time. I don't know in modern day sports that there's a tougher set of circumstances for coaches to try to work and live on in this modern era than at New Mexico or New Mexico State, or even just down I-10 at Texas El Paso. When you don't have resources and you have no way of resources and you don't have much of a tradition in your athletic programs, that's really hard. And when you have the good season, somebody's going to come take your coach, or somebody's definitely going to come take your players. So I would, I wrote this, or I made a comment about this. New Mexico and New Mexico State might be the 2 toughest places to have to coach right now, just because there's not a lot of great tradition. Not to say that the Pan American Center in Las Cruces isn't a cool place to see a game, or being in the pit isn't an experience. But, if you don't have tradition, you don't have resources, and you haven't had great success, how the hell do you stay your head above water? Lobos, what a great football season they had this past year with Bronco Mendenhall. And he was one and done. He went from there and he left. And where'd he go? Utah State?
Yeah, Utah State.
After one really successful season where he put the Lobos back on the map. And poor New Mexico State is just staggered in terms of resurrecting their football program and keeping it at a competitive level. I mean, their fans and their alum follow it, but they don't follow it to the point that some of these bigger schools with fundraising and NIL money, it's just a different time.
Well, New Mexico is a poor state, relative to California and Texas. I mean, my son played at New Mexico for the baseball team. And, you're pitching a baseball pitcher at elevation. That's a tough place to play, I'll tell you what. But I remember New Mexico State, was it 2-3 years ago? They had this really enormous basketball player. And I think he was like Pakistani or from India. And but he was like 7-something. He was a beast. And I think he might have gotten drafted or played in the G League. You remember that?
I remember, right. It's faintly. But their problem is holding on to players or holding on to coaches that do a good job in impossible situations and wind up leaving.
Well, yeah, because there's so much more money elsewhere.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say not only the Aggies and the Lobos and the UTEP Miners, and Wyoming's in the same set of circumstances now. That's the only university in the state. But I swear to you, I bet they don't have 3 high school players a year that can play Division I college football. And I don't think they got a ton of resources.
Yeah, they don't.
They support Wyoming football like you wouldn't believe. But, we watched the basketball game the other night. Did they have 50 people there? I mean, the empty seats were phenomenal in that auditorium. And that's a program that has had some really good seasons, but they can't keep the coaches because they keep leaving.
Yeah, the coach they have now was a Sundance Wicks. I love
Yeah.
that name. He seems like a good guy, but yeah, he might only be there for a little bit. By the way, the Arena Auditorium, which is that's in a redundant name, isn't it?
Yes.
It just drives me crazy. The other comment, though, about New Mexico State, I'll say this, is that when New Mexico played New Mexico State in baseball, it's a great rivalry in all the sports, but the New Mexico State University had an incredible television production team.
Mhm.
When they were filming or, live streaming the game there in Las Cruces, and I was really impressed with what they did there.
Is that the game your kid gave up 6 runs in the first inning? They had to drag him off the mound.
Yeah, well,
Altitude.
Yeah, altitude's tough.
Yeah. What I'd really like to see, and I was hoping the Mountain West would do it, but it hasn't happened. With the ones that are remaining behind after San Diego State, Boise State defect, and they brought UTEP in. They should bring New Mexico State in. I mean, that would be great because then you'd have a triangle of the Aggies, the Lobos, and the Miners as a way to recreate that rivalry and put them in a better conference situation. I'd like to see New Mexico State get it. New Mexico State's had terrible off the field, off the floor problems with guns, betting, sexual assaults. They've had a real leadership problem in the Aggies athletic program. Keep chugging, Las Cruces. Thanks for joining us.
One of my son's teammates when he was playing for New Mexico Lobos was murdered. He was killed in a bar fight. It was a tragic story. So New Mexico has a certain crime level. It's a poor state, but there's a lot of good people there. Our experiences there were very positive. So yeah, I like your idea of mixing El Paso in there because then you get a little bit of that Texas Western history and all of the great things that brought to the table.
Las Cruces, you stay with us every week. Thanks for joining us long distance. Go ahead, John.
Okay, let's go here to Robert. A couple of topics here. One is Pete Rose should be allowed to be in the Hall of Fame after he waits as long as Shoeless Joe. And then any thoughts on Scott Kingery last 2 years in AAA?
Well, he was a guy with the Phillies, and he's a multi-position guy. Got to prove he can hit major league pitching on a consistent basis. He's one of the, 28 or 21 street free agents the Angels have brought in. Some of the guys are playing really well in the spring. Kyle Hendrick, the Chicago Cub right-hander, has not given up a run in 3 starts for the Halos in the Cactus Leagues. Now, he was a really consistent pitcher with the Cubs, and I said, well, if he can be what Kyle Hendricks used to be, that's a nice insurance policy. They got Kikuchi, who came from the Astros, a former Blue Jay. He got smoked in his first start. He couldn't get anybody out, and they took him out in the first inning. But again, he's a vested veteran. They got 3 weeks to work on that. So Kingery, he's part of the rotation with Kevin Newman and all these other insurance policy veterans. He'll get a chance. And he might be a bench guy. He's not going to be a starter at this point. But with Zach Neto not being able to start the season, the young star shortstop, Kevin Newman's probably going to be the starting shortstop. That probably opens a chance for Kingery to come off the bench.
Yeah, I remember when Kingery was with the Phillies coming up, and he was the next thing, and never quite panned out. It's kind of like Brandon Rogers is another player, another middle infielder, and he was with the Rockies.
Yeah, and they let him go, and that kind of stunned me.
Yeah, but he's bounced around a little bit. I don't think he's really emerged as an everyday player.
Hasn't gotten consistent. Has not hit back to what Rogers hit back early on, because I thought star in the making here.
Yeah.
And he had a year and a half, and then he just downhill. Now he's gone. Now, he's either in Arizona or he's in Houston. He just signed like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. There's a video, Tommy Pham was talking about how service time in Major League Baseball used to be 5.5 years. Now it's only around 3. So guys, they show up, they get a cup of coffee, and they're gone. I mean, they churn through this talent so fast.
Union got them a good deal. It doesn't mean that they're staying. You got to produce to stay.
No question.
Robert, thanks for joining us. Go ahead.
Okay, go to Hector here. He goes, Lee, do you think the Chargers would have preferred some Robert Frost instead?
He's making reference to Harbaugh's team meetings where he's quoting Chaucer and Shakespeare. Yeah, Robert Frost, road well traveled and all that. I'll be interested. The Chargers have not responded to the survey in which their players rated Jim Harbaugh 26th and 32nd in a couple different categories. So I told you, Harbaugh, tent revival speech. It's great for a while, but I think I kind of get worn out on that.
Some coaches are intellectuals, and have like really good things to say. I mean, I think Popovich is one of those, and John Wooden, of course, is like a master philosopher in his own way. But then there's other coaches that kind of get full of themselves, and they think, that they're like a Shakespeare historian.
The report said one of the players wrote, as Charger players evaluating their own organization with a list of, I think it's 11 different questions they checked off. One of the players wrote, what value is there to sit in a team meeting in which the coach talks about Shakespeare or Chaucer for 26 minutes? What value? They were criticizing time efficiency, I think was the topic to read Harbaugh, and that's how we got a 32.
Well, hopefully you make some adjustments. You're getting some feedback.
Okay.
Important feedback.
We move on.
Okay.
Thanks, Hector.
Let's go here to some social media comments from the crowd. And let's go start here with Ernie. And he says, hey, thanks, Lee. 2 San Diego staples, Lee Hacksaw and Dixie Line Lumber. Love them both for over a half a century.
And what about the guy in left field? I'm gonna step aside on my website. I'm gonna let John start writing once a week column. John Riley from left field with his opinions. He'll be responsible for whatever the junk that comes out of his keyboard. But
yeah,
that, salute the guy, because I wouldn't be here doing this were it not for him. So I blame him when it goes bad.
Well, we have complementary skills, I think. No one will top you in the world of bringing sports content topics on the table. I'm just here to kind of let it, channel through the interwebs.
Okay, but salute him too, because he's part of the problem here as well as being part of the solution. Thanks for being with us.
Okay, let's go here to Carlos, and he goes, why is there a Padres on the YouTube thumbnail? A few weeks ago, you guys were talking about how the Padres rotation and team was in trouble. They had a mid-starting pitcher, and all of a sudden they're a top rotation?
No, because we knew how good the top 3 were, but you need at least 5. And in all honesty, you probably need 7 or 8 starters. Well, the Padres get Pivetta, and Pivetta was a pretty good pitcher. Didn't show up statistically because Boston was in the middle of rebuild last year, and they were playing all their kids. And they started really bad, and they finished really strong. Pivetta was part of that. As a number 4 starter, Pivetta is rock solid. I'd take that number 4 over most of the number 4s other teams are running out there. But they're wafer thin. And if Waldron can be what Waldron was the first half of last season, okay, now you got 5. And then obviously, if they think Kolek makes this jump from the bullpen to become a starter, that's an insurance policy. That's 6. And Kolek has not given up an earned run yet in exhibition play. So, you're saying I was talking about holes. Well, they did have holes prior to the Pivetta acquisition and then the emergence of a new look with Waldron and what Kolek has shown so far. So they're better now than they were in mid-February. So I make a comment in mid-February and people think it's set in cement. It's going to be that way forever and ever. No, because teams change. Guys get injured. Guys develop like Jackson Merrill, or they make deals to bring guys from the outside that are insurance policies and add. Does that make sense? Or
well, it just depends what your benchmark is. Like if you're going to compare the Padres starting rotation to the Dodgers, it's apples and oranges. It's broomsticks and closets. So but when you compare it to all the other major league teams, yeah, I mean, you had with their top 3, they were sort of in the mid of the pack, and now they got the 4th guy with Pivetta, but the other one in the mix is Vasquez, and he kind of got lit up a couple of nights ago, right?
His history right there is young guy, good innings, then a bad inning, and he never survives the bad inning, and that was all of last year, and that's what he was his last start. He just got creamed in the first couple innings. So he's probably at this point, as we sit here, he's probably your 7th starter. But if you have to go to him, if he becomes more regular, I think you got problems. But their whole thing, that's what spring training is just to give them innings, build them, and just slot them once we get to the end of the Cactus League as to how deep they can be. But you're going to need depth because the injury factor in Major League pitching is it's devastating. So that's where we are.
All right, let's keep moving. Okay, let's talk some Angels here. And this is with RJM for USC. And he goes, Artie Moreno is the Jerry Jones of baseball, saying again the team is not for sale. Why not? You have been the worst clown act owner. Gene Autry is rolling in his grave.
Well, Artie was well received when he bought the thing from Disney. You know, they did get to the World Series. They did win. And then Disney kind of let it fall into neglect. And Artie came on board and rescued it. And they had success with what he inherited. But they had nothing but bad luck since. And, you know, bad acquisitions, bad injuries, bad drug problems, bad tragedies off the field. It's just been one after the other for Artie Moreno. Now, they reinvested. Their payroll has been bumped up. It's at $202 million right now. But for supposedly being in the second market in the country is Tony Clark of the Union. He really stepped out of character by nailing them last Friday. He said, hey, you want to be number 2 market in the country, then spend like you're the number 2 market in the country. Don't be sitting here with a $202 million payroll when the luxury tax is at $241. You got money to spend. You need to go get more quality players. Now, Tony just wants players to be signed. Tony's not paying attention to Josh Hamilton, the druggie, stealing all that money, or what's happened to Rendon because of injuries, because that's all part of the equation too. So, but he was really pointed in what he said about Artie Moreno, and then the jury is out until they get better. They can't have another 90-loss season. They got to make some progress, but they've got farm system guys that got there, and more young guys coming this year. We'll just see if they and as John said, they need a stroke of luck. They've had so much bad luck with injuries and tragedies too.
You know how, like, I know with the Padres, they'll talk about a window, you know, of where they project when their team could be contenders. And I remember they were talking about this 22 to 25 year range back in 2018. But you never hear that language from the Angels, you know, which goes back to, I don't know what their strategy is. I just don't understand it.
Concur. I mean, they've drafted a lot. A few of them have gotten there. They had one draft, I want to say it's about 4 years back now. They used all 21 of their picks on pitchers. Not one of those guys has gotten to the major leagues, has been an impact guy. That system failed. Now, they got the young shortstop, they got the young catcher, they got the young first baseman, they got this high draft pick, a second baseman, third baseman this year that might be the next one stepping forward. They just need to continue to develop. But to go from 99 losses to being a playoff team, that's a lot of steps you got to take. So they're not anywhere near close to this is who we can be.
Yeah. It's just a disappointment.
Yep.
You know? Okay, let's jump around. We'll talk here about Coach Prime. This is from G. Smith. And he goes, apparently you have not paid attention to his up-to-date recruiting class #1 quarterback out of high school, #1 defensive lineman, or maybe top 5 in other spots that you need to pay attention to before you talk this crap on your podcast, because it's inaccurate and I'm being nice.
I'm not sure that I've talked a lot of crap outside of the fact I totally disagreed with Coach Prime running off his entire roster, throwing them all into the transfer portal. He's done that 2 years in a row. He wound up with 17 recruits. He's had a good recruiting year. A couple of kids, late commits, decommitted other places, including the young quarterback. That he's done well. Now, there is no Shedeur Sanders right there, and there is no more Travis Hunter. So this will be a different type of Colorado football team rather than having that experience of those two kids and what they did at Jackson State. They flipped Jackson State and kind of saved them. And obviously they helped make Colorado something really special, but those guys are now gone. But he has been a magnet. He's got 17 transfers, and I think the last I checked, 17 high school commitments. So that's positive. But when you say I'm talking crap, I'm not denouncing them. They were overwhelmed the first year with a bad offensive line because I ran off so many players. Second year started well, kind of faded to the back end, got their brains beat out right at the end of the season. And now they'll go to his third year, but he won't have Shedeur and he won't have Travis Hunter, and those are two really significant kids. So he's making progress. We'll see now if they can and then grow this, if they go from 8 wins to 9, bowl game, success, or regress back to 3 or 4 wins because it'll be a rebuild season. But just giving you the facts as I view it. It's not that I have any agenda, Coach Prime. I'm just telling you who it is, what he did, my response to it. No? Yes?
You still call him Neon Dion, and I know he doesn't like that, and Coach Prime supporters don't like him being referred to by that old nickname. But I remember you were talking about how Prime wasn't going on the high school visits.
Yeah, last week we had that story broke that he's not making recruiting visits. You want to come here? Come visit here. Come visit me.
Yeah, but it just goes to show you that the magnet effect is far greater than any negativity of him not flying out to, some small high school in Missouri to go talk to a player.
Well, he's only been there 2 years. We'll see what third year is. And, if they give ground in this third year because his sons are gone, then you say he's not doing it correctly. We'll see what the year 3 brings. He's had success. There's no doubt they've had success. But hell, when you're 1-11 at the school with great tradition, God, Bill McCartney must be spinning in his grave as to what that thing had become. And he rallied it. He did a really good job. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of different facets to the job, except having media shows and videographers going with you every time you go to the training table to eat and things of that nature. There's a lot more to the game. We'll see what year 3 is like.
Do you think the athletic director at Colorado is still supportive?
Sure.
Because probably that he's bringing in way more money, putting Colorado back on the map where they belong. But will Prime's act ever be too tired? I can never imagine him being fired.
It just depends. What do they become? He's had first year doing it my way, second year trying to build on it, having to redo it. Now we'll see what the third year is. It's way too early to say this was bad hire. Good hire financially, hell yes, for the university. In terms of notoriety, hell yes. We'll see if they can translate this and just take another step up this ladder of being in the playoffs, 12-team playoffs.
Right on, yeah.
Okay, we move on.
Okay, we'll talk some Dodgers here with Joe Schmoo. He goes, Lee, the owners of the Dodgers is a hedge fund. Their total job is to make money and make money off of it. By the time these deferred payments are due, Guggenheim will have made the deferred amount of money through their investments. This is brilliant on the Dodgers' part.
Oh, it's creative financing. There's no doubt about it. And if the revenue streams of baseball continue to grow, even though they may have to pay 8 players who are no longer part of the roster, including Ohtani, those payments don't kick in till 2033, I think is the chart I built. The payments are 2033 to 2046, $1 billion for 8 players who'll definitely be gone. But if the revenue streams of baseball continue to grow the way they've grown, they'll be able to finance it and fund it. Collective bargaining agreement may view things differently going forward. The owners may want to make adjustments and changes on the next CBA, but Guggenheim's got the resources and have creatively financed this. They're not going to do it every year. There's 8 deferrals right now. There's not going to be 16 a year from now. So we'll just have to see. The other thing is, will the other clubs start to do business that way? If you're in the number 2 market in the country in LA, you can probably do it. If you're in whatever the market size of Toronto is in Canada, maybe you can't do it. That you can't have that many deferred contracts, etc. But I think there'll be some more that'll be doing it that way.
The money in this sport just keeps growing and growing. It's unbelievable. Now, $1 billion is deferred, but they have to put 10% aside, right? So roughly speaking, $100 million they put into an account, and that they can invest that and grow that. Maybe they can 10x it if they're lucky to get it up to cover the whole expense. But I think we're talking here about Guggenheim having investment income outside of the Dodgers' total financial package, right? It's like extra money that's coming into the system.
Yeah, but there's only limitations as to how you can use the extra money in the system as it relates to running your baseball franchise. There's limitations there.
Yeah, there's got to be. Yeah.
So, interesting comment.
Okay.
Yeah, Guggenheim's different than everybody else. Yankees are different. So are the Mets. Baseball's big issue is they got to make sure it's just not 5 teams in baseball that are dominant and the other 25 just show up and get their brains beat out. That's not good for the overall health of the game. That's the next thing that the union has to pay attention to, is the competitive balance, because baseball is very different than the NFL. And what makes the NFL great? Competitive balance and revenue share. So they're going to have to change some of the structure of revenue sharing in baseball. And go back to my statement, Florida spending. You got to mandate that Miami and Tampa and Sacramento and Pittsburgh and Detroit, that they have to spend at a certain level. And if they all spend, that'll mean more players will go there, because that's where the payday is going to be for the second-tier free agent pitcher and the 280 hitter. That'll make those franchises better. I don't know. I feel like I'm talking to the wall. People don't understand it. You're a smart guy. Do you understand what I say? Do I speak English?
Yeah. I mean, you want people to have, skin in the game. You want these lesser teams to be spending money, and then the whole league will benefit as a result. It's a very collectivist mentality, but the Yankees, the Dodgers, they got their own revenue streams. They don't want to give that up. But it is interesting how anytime you bring this up, and we see the comments on our YouTube channel, it's over the top, where Dodger fans are quick to respond. They're saying, hey, you got parity of spending in the NFL, and it's the darn Kansas City Chiefs every year, and here we don't have parity, but then we have teams that rise up and win, like the Kansas City Royals about 10 years ago. And, sure, the Dodgers won last year and in the COVID season, but it's not like they've won 8 in a row. It's not like the Dodgers have been the Kansas City Chiefs.
No, but they've been a first place team virtually for a decade. So therefore they're far superior to a ton of other people.
Mm-hmm.
So you can mandate, regulations as it relates to salary cap, luxury tax, my Florida spending. You can't mandate intelligence. It doesn't mean that just because they spend it, it's going to be spent correctly, or there's not going to be breakdowns or mistakes made. That's the human element of major league player acquisition. Hey, if I were king, that's what I would do, but we'll see. I'm not king yet, but I'll let you know.
You are the franchise.
I'll be on Time Magazine wearing a crown. Okay, listen, we hope you have enjoyed this podcast. We are here Mondays at 1:30, Thursdays at 1:30. Want you to share. You got a Rolodex. I want you to tell everybody who we are. Hacksaw is back. Tell them about these podcasts. You can really help us grow, and this thing has kind of really exploded. Want you to subscribe. That way you'll get all the alerts every time we put additional stuff up on the YouTube channel. Want you to check my website, leehacksawhamilton.com. It's all written. You won't believe the volume of information. I swear to you, if you give me 5 minutes every morning, go to my website, 5 minutes every morning, you'll be the most informed person at your breakfast table before you go to work or whatever you do with the rest of the day. Hope you've enjoyed what we've brought you. We'll be back here on Thursday, and then we got the NHL trading deadline. It's going to be part of the Thursday show, too. So be with us. This podcast brought to you by Dixie Line Lumber and Home Centers, 9 locations to serve you in San Diego. Build it, fix it, guarantee you'll enjoy it in 2025 thanks to the good people at Dixie Line. John, get your notebook out because you'll be filling it with trades and free agent signings. Here comes the NFL, all things NHL. We'll see you come Thursday.
Come Thursday, we'll hopefully have an Aztec update too.
On we go. Thanks for being with us on Hacksaw's Headlines.
Join us again for Hacksaw's Headlines on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And find the audio version on your favorite podcast app. For more content, go to leehacksawhamilton.com.